Hi, folks. Glenn McClure here, speaking with Rebecca Mahmood, with 25 years in the wine industry, helping us to understand how this story of Samuel Warren and this first winery in the Civil War era, okay, of in York, New York, resonates with us today. And of course, what all this is moving toward is a folk opera. It's a story of the Warrens that is told with music. In our case, with folk music. Okay, and so it's not necessarily going to sound like Puccini or Wagner or Verdi or anything like that. It's going to be a uniquely sort of local music story. And as we open up kind of a big conversation, a big question in this video, I just wanted to share with you, a little thing that is, one of the first kind of rough drafts of some music that has bubbled out of this first year of research. We were thinking that maybe that this other veteran, okay, Ed Peterson, might be remembering, his friend Harlan Warren, okay, the fellow who dies by suicide after he returns from the Civil War, that he might invite the audience to sort of remember Harlan, okay, and to hold a glass of wine when he does that, since that's so intrinsic in the whole story. And so I've been playing with this little song here, maybe as a way to define that scene in the show. It would go something like this. You can sort of imagine Ed, holding a glass, on stage in front of the audience and saying, "Raise your glass to our time together, for every sip holds within it precious times that have led us here today. So smile and laugh and cherish this moment, for all that we hold dear, I am told, may never ever come again." One of the things that brought me to this lyric here, was a conversation that Rebecca and I have had earlier, about wine as much more than just simply a beverage that you have with dinner or you order at the restaurant. That wine has so many other qualities that are unique about its creation, about its origin, about its time. It's really a vessel of memory in many ways, a vessel of sort of biological memory, okay, of the soil and the weather of that year those grapes were produced, but also as we use wine to raise our glass to remember those people that we love. Also, it becomes sort of a human memory, okay, above and beyond just the sort of biological memory. So with that as a long-winded introduction here, why is it that wine is uniquely important in this way?
Yeah, because there is no other liquid that I can think of that is a chronicle of the past, right? I mean, with wine, it's not just the vintage that it comes from, right? It's about the particular vineyard that it came from, with the place and the time. And it marks time, because within that bottle is everything that happened during the course of the year in the vineyard, mixed with how it was handled in the winery and what the winemaker wanted to bring out and communicate or express about that year. There's that old phrase, in vino veritas, and I think there is truth in wine. There is. There's no escaping a bad vintage, and we all know, like in 2020, very beginning of the pandemic, we had one of the most remarkable vintages in the country. Right, 2020 was beautiful, and the irony of a beautiful vintage occurring at a time when we really can't connect with each other. But with wine, there is not just the connection of through that bottle to that particular place and time when that wine was made, but you're also in the present and you're creating a memory for the future. And so it's this vessel of memory which connects us to the past, allows us to celebrate the future, and creates memories, allows us to celebrate the present, and it creates memories for our future. And there's really just nothing else like that, in that wine is meant to be a point of connection, not a point of escapism. It's really meant to be having that conversation with your friend, sharing those stories, and being able to look back on when the wine was made, or in the future look back on when you enjoyed that bottle together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually, I just share a quick story with you. Over the years, choirs in Germany have performed a lot of my music. Okay, and the very first gig that I had there, where a large work of mine was being performed, the host family, that I was with, the husband of the family was a huge wine expert, and they were in the Rhine Valley, so they were right there in the middle, all the best the best Rieslings in the world. And I was there for a week, and every day I'd come back home from rehearsals, and he would have 5 or 6 wines for us to try with some nice salamis and cheeses, and on the last day that I was there for the week, he pulled out all the wines, and the last one in the cycle was a Riesling from the Finger Lakes, because he went out of his way to find that, right? And for me, this is one of those examples of the point that you're making. That the drinking of that Finger Lakes wine in Frankfurt, Germany, was a new memory, and a story that I keep telling today, because he was a fellow who cared about the story of the wine and the place of the wine and the connection to the person he was chatting with.
Absolutely, that's so clever. I wonder how he would this have been in the 70s, 80s?
This would have been in the 2002.
2002, okay.
2002, 2003.
I would say that the number of Finger Lakes producers who were exporting at 2000, in the early 2000s, there was only a handful. He would have had to have worked hard to have found that bottle.
Oh yeah. And working hard to do that was this expression of friendship.
Absolutely.
Because that was time and effort that he spent.
That's right.
To do that.
That's right. It was part of the story, though.
Right. And it's part of a new memory.
That's right.
That I carry with me, and also the folks in the choir carry with them, because of course I told all of them about it. When I was there. So with all this, I think there's just so many ways in which sitting down with that fellow every day, where he had prepared this plate for this table for me every day, right? When I came home, we had long conversations, right? We had long conversations about each wine, about each region, and things like this, and that brought up other conversations, and it seems to me like the drinking of wine is something that really demands that time when we're together and cherishing a moment and telling each other stories, and these long conversations, which really pushes back against, I think, a lot of our internal rhythms that we get today of clicking likes or unlikes on social media, of deleting things we don't want to see, posting something which makes us feel like we're having a conversation, but it's really just kind of yelling at each other,
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not real connection.
It isn't, right? So how can we return back to that notion of wine as a vehicle for that long conversation, that connection?
I think that we need to take the time. We need to take the time when you're sitting with a glass of wine to be with that wine, when you're sitting with a friend, to be with that friend. We are in an era where instant gratification takes too long,
Mm-hmm.
and we've stopped sharing stories. We've stopped the behavior that wine is meant to kind of provoke and celebrate. And that means that, we're scrolling and we think that we're connected to all of these people in our feed, but we're not. It's performative. And wine is not performative. Wine demands your attention, and it's one of the best conversations that you will have, and not just about the wine, but it provokes great conversation. And think about hundreds of years of history of, you wouldn't gather without wine. You wouldn't even go to church without wine.
Mm-hmm.
Wine was a part of every single social gathering and every single point of connection within the community.
Yeah, and bringing it back into the story of the project, I think of Harlan Warren's family, right? He had a wife and 3 children, okay, and lots of other relatives and dear friends around York. When he dies by suicide, after his experience of PTSD after the Civil War, I think of that moment within that community that surrounded him, right? Okay, that I imagine some folks were just so shocked by this happening, okay, that they probably couldn't talk. They probably just wanted to find an easy way to explain it and then move on with life and hope it doesn't come up in conversation. But I'm betting, since this was a wine family, I'm betting that there were folks that were willing to sit down and have long conversations, with his wife, with his brother, with his mother, okay, about this, and I can imagine that was a setting for them to have those hard, very vulnerable conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other part of the story that I wanted to just touch on briefly before we finish is, the Warrens were making wine during one of the temperance movements, okay, in our country, and one of the really aggressive parts of the temperance movements. And of course, they were making wine. Most of their wine sales were going to Catholic churches and Congregationalist churches. Okay, so they were making sacramental wine. Okay, but also that wine would have been available in other ways. But the Warrens were on the receiving end of a lot of very, very difficult, very accusatory, very, very, very snarly accusations, just because they were making wine, right? In that world, but they persisted, and they kept on making this beautiful thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't about getting drunk. It wasn't about that. It was about making a beautiful thing, and preserving these memories that we've been talking about. How do we sort of deal with that question, today here, especially after COVID?
Right. Well, we have some challenges today. Mm-hmm. There is a temperance movement today. It's not as obvious as the temperance movement that the Warren family was trying to defend themselves against, but it still exists. You can't pick up really a magazine without having there be an article about the dangers of alcohol today. One drop is too much. Mm-hmm. You saw that same message historically before Prohibition. One drop is too much. No safe amount of alcohol. A lot of scary information trying to dissuade people from drinking at all. And no more thoughts about moderation being the answer, and moderation in everything. When the Mediterranean diet was first talked about with doctors and patients, the idea was a little bit of red wine on a regular basis is good for you.
Yeah.
I believe that's still actually true.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this idea that we should all be pulling back on our alcohol consumption, which could very well be a reaction to the overconsumption that was happening during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. So I think, as we're looking at these locally produced wines, that are, as you mentioned earlier, made at a time and in a place by certain people with care. Okay, as we're, and we're thinking about what we're going to have with our dinner, right? That that we have to be mindful of putting those kinds of warnings in context. Okay, because I think what you mentioned is so important that the pendulum swings both ways right now. Okay, and after so many of us felt so isolated and lonely, and that created so many more problems for everyone in all sorts of ways, right? Okay, now we're coming back from that, and now we have to look at it with fresh eyes.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that wine is more important now than ever because it is about bringing us back together and reconnecting with each other and sharing our stories. And wine is the best vehicle, really, for that.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation today. Again, Rebecca Mahmood here, for the Wine and War Project. Thank you, folks.